The NCAA president is proposing a new rule that could change college sports forever. The proposal would allow some schools to pay student athletes, but some fans are wary smaller schools could be left behind. ABC's Andrew Dimbert has the latest.
The NCAA is out with a game-changing proposal that would allow certain schools to pay college athletes for the first time. In a letter to Division I schools, NCAA President Charlie Baker proposes creating a new subdivision that would allow participating programs to offer compensation to athletes.
This has been a long time coming. There has been a crescendo over the last, say, several years, and certainly over the last decade, where it became something where people were calling everywhere from all corners of the sports world. You've got to give athletes some of the money.
Under the proposal, schools would now be allowed to enter lucrative name, image, and likeness deals with athletes. They'd also be required to invest a minimum of $30,000 per athlete each year into a trust fund for at least half their athletes. That investment would have to adhere to Title IX, meaning equal distribution for men and women.
That is, I think, a very strong statement about the value of women athletes and women's sports that will trickle down all the way from the colleges, all the way to that 5-year-old girl starting to play soccer, or that 12-year-old girl playing volleyball, or that 15-year-old girl playing basketball, that they will understand that there is value in what they're doing.
The idea already catching on. A top official at Ohio State University saying he's 100% supportive. What remains to be seen is the potential impact the proposal would have on smaller schools that may not have the financial capacity to participate.
For the next few weeks and months, every university will go back, their president, their athletic director, and they'll start to evaluate what they can and cannot do. Not only what they have financially, but also what ethically they want to do.
Andrew Dimbert, thanks for that. And let's bring in ESPN staff writer Dan Murphy for more on this. Dan, student athletes are already allowed to earn money from NIL deals. So how is this different?
This money would be coming directly from the schools. The money athletes make now comes from sponsors, whether it's big brands like Gatorade or Dr. Pepper or the local pizza shop on campus. And a lot of the money has actually been coming from boosters who might otherwise donate directly to the athletic department, putting their money in these funds that can then pay out these athletes directly in what has become sort of a de facto salary. But the big change is here, schools will be paying the athletes themselves, which makes the athletes a little bit closer to an employee-employer relationship. And that's a Rubicon that up until Charlie Baker announced this plan, nobody who is in charge of college sports has been willing to even talk about crossing.
Now, schools would be required to invest a minimum of $30,000 per athlete. How many programs can afford that, and what happens to the programs who can't?
So there are two buckets that Baker's proposal opens up. One is an NIL deal where they can sign whatever money they want. The other is this trust fund, the $30,000 a year. And there are probably about 50 to 100 schools roughly a year that might be able to afford that have budgets that are in the 9 figures, 100 million, sometimes $200 million a year for the biggest, wealthiest schools. For the rest of Division I, there's about 350 schools in Division I. They would be playing with a shorter hand, right? Everything in college sports comes back to recruiting. And if these richer schools can offer more money to athletes, they're obviously going to get the better athletes. To a certain degree, that already happens. So it's not clear how much that will change competitive equity. But this is really just addressing the reality of how different some of these budgets are among schools that right now are competing on the same playing field.
Now, these trust funds would be subject to Title IX rules. So what would that mean for women's sports?
I think it'd be really important, right? When the NIL rules changed just a few years ago that allowed athletes to start making money on sponsorships, one of the big fears was all the money is going to flow to football and men's basketball players, and it's going to end up hurting women's sports or non-revenue sports that don't generate a lot of revenue. We've actually seen the opposite. Women's sports are never have never been as popular as they have been in the past couple of years. The Women's March Madness tournament was a huge success in terms of ratings and recognizable athletes. And I think by pulling some of this money under the athletic department's umbrella, you're going to see more and more investment in women's sports from these colleges. And one thing that we've learned, whether it's in the pro level or at the college level, the more you invest in women's sports, the more they grow and flourish. And this is certainly an opportunity to take that even to the next level.
So what are you hearing from school leaders? How likely is this to actually happen?
As you might imagine, it's a mixed bag. There are certainly some that are excited about this and have wanted to see this coming, where NCAA realizes the reality that they're living in, that this is in many ways a large business, one that generates billions of dollars a year. And this will allow schools to kind of act more like the businesses that many of them are. But there are people that are pushing back on it. Like I said, schools really don't want to get into the business of being the employer of their student athletes. And I think that's going to take some adjustment for them to get used to. Charlie Baker said yesterday at a conference he was speaking at in Las Vegas that this is a conversation starter. And I think much like when somebody throws out an initial negotiating anchor, whether it's legislation or some type of a deal, this is his first shot at throwing this out there. And I think this will be evolved and modified, and other people will put strings on some of this as it goes through the NCAA's rulemaking process, which can be slow and cumbersome. But it is an unprecedented starting point for this kind of conversation. And I think it will end up in some kind of action because of all of the big threats college sports are facing right now and the fact that they need to do something to be more proactive.
All right, ESPN staff writer Dan Murphy, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.